So we're talking about a non-judicial process. Now the reason it can be non-judicial is because we've changed the parties that are at play in a mortgage state rather than a trustee state. So a state that we're in the foreclosure process judicially, you only have two parties. You have the borrower and you have a lender. All right? In a trustee state, you have three parties. You have the borrower, a lender, and you have a neutral third party who is imbued with the power to foreclose right from the beginning, right by the owner of the property. He promises that if he fails to pay, then he's not going to object to a non-judicial foreclosure process. That foreclosure process is actually been created by our legislature, and so it's uniform throughout the entire state. There are no favorites where you have different rules in different counties. All right? So we have three parties. So the borrower is known as the trustor in this system. All right? That neutral third party is called the trustee. And then we have the lender, known as the beneficiary. So this would be the bank, this would be the stakeholder, and this is going to be the property owner. All right. So when a loan is made, the paperwork that's involved is signed by just the borrower. Okay? So the borrower signs the deed of trust, which, as I say, gives two primary essential rights to the trustee. One, the power of sale, and the other is the requirement of reconveyance if he pays the mortgage on time and doesn't owe anything. Then basically the state requires, and the document itself, the deed of trust, requires that the lien be taken off his property, and it's done through a document called a reconveyance, which is recorded. Okay. And then there's the promissory note. So the promissory note is the evidence of debt, the acknowledgement that I owe you money. So it's a written IOU. And so I'm acknowledging that the loan was made. I acknowledge that I have to pay it back, and I'm going to pay it back on the agreed upon terms. So much a month, at a certain interest rate, and if I'm tardy, a late charge, stuff like that. Does that make sense? Is that familiar with you guys? So we have two pieces of paper, primary pieces of paper. We have the evidence of debt. We have a document that actually secures the repayment of that because the owner is putting up the title to the property he just bought as security for the loan. Okay? So if he doesn't pay, he's going to forfeit the title to that property. Now, when he bought the property, he probably put some cash out of pocket down, especially now. Okay? You got to put now. Modernly, you got to have to now, after all these liar loans, you got to put down 20% down. Okay, that's what's called skin in the game. So he's going to lose that plus the house if he doesn't perform as promised. Now, why do foreclosures basically take place? They take place because at the time that the owner qualified for a loan, he met all the criteria. All right, he met the criteria for a job. He had a credit history that was a positive credit history, the right FICO numbers. He had verifiable income, all right, that sort of thing. So he qualified, and a loan was made on that basis. The loans are made for about 30 years, since 1935, when the Federal National Mortgage Association was created. It's called Fannie Mae. They changed the loan situation in the United States back in 35 from the 15-year standard to a 30-year standard. So you can take twice as long to pay the loan off. Or if you take twice as long to pay it off, each payment could be a heck of a lot less than if it was at 15 years versus 30 years. Okay? So 30-year length of time. Do you think that during that 30-year length of time that crap can happen? Has any crap happened to you in the last 30 years? Yeah, probably. Okay? And so if it happens, and all of a sudden the situation that existed at the time you borrowed could be radically different. You could be in jail, you could be dead, you could be divorced, you could have lost your job, you could be chronically ill, you could have all this kind of stuff that's called life happen. And now you're not as qualified to make that mortgage payment that you originally were. you and the wife could make that payment. Now the wife's not around, or you're not around, or you're around but you can't work, and on and on and on. Now if that persists for a longer period of time than what it takes us to process a foreclosure in California, the foreclosure is going to win. Foreclosure is roughly about 4 months, and we'll diagram that on the board. All right? And so if you have cancer, it might take you a little bit longer than 4 months to cure that problem. All right? Or if you got divorced, it might take you longer than 4 months to get number 2 or 3, ready. Stuff like that. So it all boils down to some disruptor. You name the disruptor, it doesn't matter, to tell you the truth. But it disrupted the amount of income coming into the family to such a degree that you can't make the mortgage payment. All right? And that's the normal reason why there's foreclosures, and that's why there always will be foreclosures, because we have no way of foretelling when that stuff is going to hit. It almost always seems to hit, at least me, at the worst possible time. Okay? So, then we have some crazy stuff that happens every once in a while, and that is like this episode we had recently where all of a sudden everything seemed to go to hell with no rules, no regulations, no nothing. If you could fog a mirror, you could borrow money, you didn't have to qualify. People made loans based on equity. The equity was spurious because the properties went up in a bubble, so they really weren't what they were selling for. All that nonsense happened. Okay? I bet you most people in this room are sick and tired of it, and want it to go away, have the government take care of the problem, process the foreclosures, get it over with, and let's get back to where business is normal. We're dragging our feet, and until we don't drag our feet and get rid of this deadwood, all right, that's going to be an element that exacerbates the problem, makes it just a little worse than it would be. Okay? Any problems? Now, when is this market going to get back to get out of its doldrums and the dumps? It's going to happen when people start buying houses. People cannot buy houses anymore unless they can prove they can afford it. So they got to have a job. They got to have a job. They got to have some source of verifiable income. All right, so fine, they got the job, but is there any pressure on employers right now to pay big, fancy salaries? Yes or no? No. So you notice that the chances of salaries going up and going up far enough that people can qualify to buy properties that are up here is probably not going to happen. So if we're going to have a market where people have got money and can afford to buy, and it's at a price that they're allowed to buy, a reasonable price, then what's got to happen? Prices got to come down, right? In other words, you got to have a place where the property is priced at such a point that the people who are qualified to buy, all right, they can afford it. They can afford it, and they have ratios for that. Basically, you can't pay more than about long-term, more than about a third of your income in order to hope that you are going to make those payments on a regular basis. So to get it to win that ratio of a third, either the incomes have got to go up or the price of the property's got to come down. I think you have to agree that the thing that's most likely going to have to happen is what? Prices coming down. Okay? Prices coming down. And so that means that we're going to have even more foreclosures, because as prices come down, people who are right now, right here where the property is only worth the loan against it, we know that in order for this thing to clear up, the values of property are going to come down, okay? And so now this guy's got a loan that's higher than what he owes.